This next panel, it's going to be really the global paradigm shift in early detection of Alzheimer's.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. My name is Rani Abu-Rashid. I'm a neurologist at my core, so I'll start with that. Actually, neuroimmunology was my subspecialty. What I'm going to talk about today, I think, is something that many of us don't realize the impact of what is about to happen over the next 25 years, not just in the United States, but globally. Alzheimer's disease is predicted to increase to 150 million people by 2050. Right now, we're at about 50 million, and there's good reason for that. Longevity, our health, everything that was alluded to earlier. We talked about life expectancy. In 1900, life expectancy was 32, right? It took us 125 years to make it 73, and we're going to continue to push that with our technology, which is beautiful. Alzheimer's disease, the way I want you to think about this disease is that right now, in this room, many of us have something happening in our brain. There is deposition of amyloid, kind of like rust on the bottom of a car, that we don't know about. It happens slowly. It sort of begins in our mid-40s, into our 50s, mid-50s, and then continues. And it can be happening to many of us. Now, let's assume we had a cure for Alzheimer's disease today. Only 6% of people with the disease would get to that cure. That is our current infrastructure. And let me explain why. The treatments for Alzheimer's, there are 2 of them that are FDA approved right now, but there's 182 clinical trials globally. So we will solve the disease problem with a treatment at some point. The issue is, like rust on the bottom of a car, you cannot pull the rust off the car. You can only prevent it from sticking and accumulating and accumulating. So what's happening in Alzheimer's, the reason this is such a disaster in the making, is that we are too late. By the time you come into my office and see me, it's too late. I can tell you you have Alzheimer's disease. I can diagnose you. I can say, yep. But your meaningful life, your meaningful memory is no longer salvageable. There's too much damage in the brain. And so many people are focused on the biopharmacy side of Alzheimer's. Can we treat Alzheimer's? So my career and the universe built this company, Neurogen Biomarketing. And let me explain a little bit about this. I spent the first 7 years of my neurology life practicing neurology, day in, day out, seeing patients, and I built a very big neuroscience institute. Very successful institute, is still going, treats thousands of patients. I had the privilege of doing that. It was important for me to see what the families of Alzheimer's patients go through, what the disease looks like in the real world, not in academic world, not in just America. In 2018, I was in Germany speaking, and I went to an exhibit hall, and there was a small machine in the corner, the size of a refrigerator. I said, what is this thing? It was an MIT lab that developed it. And it was a machine called a single molecule array assay. Don't worry about that. What the lady told me, she said, we can measure proteins in the blood down to nanograms per deciliter. So I want you to think about this for a second. We can measure proteins in the blood down to nanograms per deciliter, very minute amounts. I immediately came back to the States that Monday, and I ordered the first machine in the United States to be in a clinical practice. Stupidest decision, well, it might be a good decision, but at the time, horrible decision. I had no money. I bought the thing for 200 grand. I put it in my practice. And I said, I'm going to do research on this thing because the future of neurology is early diagnosis. It's proteins. So we started measuring proteins. So now I want you all to think about this. When you have Alzheimer's disease, when you have rust developing on the bottom of your brain, okay, segments of that rust go into your spinal fluid. Let's say arbitrarily you have 1,000 units of amyloid or tau in your spinal fluid. About 4 or 5 of those leak into the blood. And our technology could not measure it in the blood, only in the spinal fluid, which is not something any of you want to do, especially if you're not having severe symptoms, right? If your memory is not horrible, you're not going to let me do a spinal tap on you. You're just not going to, it's a high-risk procedure, infections, etc. So I grabbed this unit, I put it in my office, and I start doing a prospective trial on everyone who comes into my practice. And lo and behold, many of you probably heard on May 10th, the FDA approval of phosphorylated tau 217, p-tau 217. We can now measure in your blood and in my blood, and I measure mine every year. I have for the last 5 years, but I have some connections to this. We can now measure p-tau 217 in your blood, which will tell us about 10 years before symptoms are severe enough that you are at a significant risk to develop Alzheimer's, up to 97% sensitive, 93% specific. So that's amazing, right? That's an incredible thing now. We have a blood test that can tell us predictively that you are going to get Alzheimer's disease, or you're at a significant risk for it. So I was excited about that, but there's nuance to this test. It's not binary. It's not positive, negative. There are nuances to it. If you have kidney disease, it can give you a false positive. If you have a previous stroke, it can give you a false positive. So when I first looked at this, I said, everyone's focused on solving Alzheimer's, but no one is taking this innovation, this beautiful blood test, which I love, and is democratizing it or setting up an ecosystem that can handle it properly. And that is what we built at Neurogen Biomarking. So the first step that we took was, number one, if your symptoms are very mild, everyone here is busy. If you have a little bit of memory issue, you have a bad day, you make an excuse for it. Oh, I'm stressed out, or I had too much wine last night, or I didn't sleep well, right? And we keep doing that throughout our lives. So I knew right away, there's no way people psychologically are going to go in for a blood test proactively unless their symptoms are affecting their life. You don't go to the orthopedic surgeon if your knee's not hurting, right? But if an orthopedic surgeon is next to you and you're sitting here at a conference and you got a little click, you might be like, hey, take a look at this, right? It's convenient. So the first step was, can we do this at home? Can we make this so simple for people? And that was our first R&D, was figuring out the IP around accessing blood at home in a self-administered way or by phlebotomy, and getting it to be stable for this protein up to 72 hours to get to our CLIA CAP New York certified lab. And we were able to achieve that, thank God. So we had that now. That was the first step. The next step was, what do we do when someone's positive? We can't have people floating out in the world with this elevated blood test freaking out. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean? Am I getting Alzheimer's tomorrow? Am I going to die? What's happening, right? So the next step was, can we build infrastructure in the neurology world to support patients who are positive? And so we went out and we got a large swath of board-certified neurologists, brought them in, educated them, put them through an entire system of understanding this protein and how to communicate it and what it means, and brought them in. And so now anyone who's positive directly gets a telehealth neurology educational session that walks them through their particular nuance. What is it that you have? What is it that, do you have kidney disease? They can handle that nuance of the science. And then the last step was, now that we have these people, how do we get them into brick and mortar neurology practices? And that is the Neurogen Diamond Network. So that is a network around the United States first, but we are very much expanding globally, and we do have the rights for the test in North America, Europe, and Pan-Asia. Is how do we get those people now, 5 to 7 years before they ever would have seen a neurologist, how do we now get them into the system to go on either treatment or to go on, a clinical trial? So when you think about the problem in Alzheimer's, I want everyone to change the focus. The problem is not our treatments yet. We're going to get better with treatments. The problem in Alzheimer's is we need to know before the brain is damaged too much for us to do anything. If I see 15 patients, I don't practice anymore, but if I saw 15 Alzheimer's patients today in my practice, I promise you one of them will be eligible for the treatment. Just one. So that is the actual core problem that people have not focused on. Now, I'm very proud to say a couple things about what we've done and what we've seen. So I said the universe built this company, and let me explain why again. First 7, 8, 9 years of my life, clinical practice, building a huge neuroscience institute, and doing the research. I then flipped to the hospital executive side of things with hospital ownership. And I learned how damaged the system is as a whole. It cannot take people in properly. It cannot manage people at scale in a way that makes sense. And that allowed me to sort of see the entire panacea of what this needs to look like from end to end. And I'm very proud to say that we ran our first 500 people through the system over the course of the last 6 to 8 weeks now. Of those 500, we had 118 test positive. Those 118 people are the same people we see in this room. They are working, they handle their own finances, they still take care of themselves, but they have minor issues in their cognition. Those 118 people now have gotten ahead of their disease and are now in our Neurogen Diamond network for confirmatory testing and potentially going on treatment, and we captured all of them at scale, 500. You got to understand the gravity of that. So 118 people, the largest memory unit in the United States, Washington University, Suzanne Schindler's team, they've been treating Alzheimer's with the treatments for 2 years. They've been available for 2 years now. They have approximately 168 people on drug, and it took them 2 years. We found it in about 13 hours of us being active. And so now we begin our beta launch. And so last week we have thousands waiting on the wait list. Last week we released our first 200 as we iterate the process and make sure that we can get people into the system. But it's an incredible opportunity that from a global standpoint, I think every country needs to understand the financial issue that's about to happen. An Alzheimer's patient diagnosed late costs the system anywhere between $7,000 and $13,000 per year per patient. So in the US right now, it's about $350 billion a year of Medicare dollars are spent on Alzheimer's. If you diagnose someone early, that number decreases from $6,000 to $13,000 down to $2,000 to $3,000. If you diagnose them just 2 to 3 years earlier, because of what you can put into place. Because lifestyle modification also has a profound effect on Alzheimer's progression. So if you stop drinking, it will slow it down. If you exercise, if you walk, it will slow it down. If you stay socially engaged, it will slow it. These are real, meaningful changes, not kind of the foo-foo ones you hear about, oh, walk more. No, it actually makes a difference because blood flow makes a difference. And so as we enter a new era, this is a challenge. This is going to be a challenge for every one of us. Everyone in this room, I know, has been touched by this disease somewhere, in some way. A loved one, a mom, a grandma, whatever it is. And it doesn't matter what race you are, what religion you are, where you grow up, it is going to come for all of us. And that is something that we have to be aware of as we all get better with longevity and peptides and all these things that are happening. And so my challenge to the room is to think of Alzheimer's as a number one problem that needs to be solved globally. Because what it's going to do to us financially, it's not tenable. $1.5 trillion estimated annually in 2050 if we make no changes. Now, we believe this change will be the change that sort of sparks a shift in this paradigm massively. We are targeting 40 million Americans between the age of 40 and 60 right now that are concerned about their memory. So we're not testing asymptomatic people yet. If you have nothing, we don't test you yet. But if you have some little issues, we test you. And I would tell people, feel empowered to be tested. I test myself every year. I'm 45. I'm going to keep doing it for the rest of my life. Because the minute I see an uptick is the minute that I'm going to act. And that's going to drive the innovation. It's going to drive every piece of our treatment paradigms, everything, all of our clinical trials. It takes years to enroll clinical trials. We don't want that. We want our clinical trials to really rapidly fill up in the Alzheimer's space. We have a lot of really unique compounds coming out, tau therapies coming out. They mentioned GLP-1s, and there's some mixed thoughts on that. Novo Nordisk has a GLP-1 that they think that's going to read out in November. And so in the end, I think what I would say to everyone in the room is no matter what country you're from, this type of ecosystem innovation needs to happen now. It cannot wait. Because we know it's not going to be perfect on day one. We're aware of that. But in 3 to 4 years, that impact is going to be profound and in the billions and billions of dollars, and more importantly, in the billions and billions of lives that we can affect, family lives, and so on and so forth. So With that, thank you guys so much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. So.
I just would like to thank everybody because really, he's so right that it is going to touch all of us. And we've all had someone near and dear to us, even if it's not ourselves, that is going to be affected by it. And I think at 45, and I don't want to tell you how old I am, I'm ancient, but I think I wish I would have known this back then at 45, what I heard now. And I think I could remember a lot more, including what my next sentence is going to be. But anyway, no joking aside, it really is a very serious issue, and it's one that I'm very thrilled that we were able to address here with all of you. And thank you for listening, and I would encourage all of you to reach out to Dr. Rani because he really does have a solution for what is going to be a huge problem, is a huge problem for all of us, not just here, but globally. Dr. Rani?
Thanks, Francis. Appreciate it. Thank you, Dr.